Hi, everybody. Pastor Dave here. Welcome back to the Crossroads Lent 40-40 Challenge, where we are reading 40 chapters of the Bible in the 40 days of Lent. Today is day 11, and we're reading through Job 1. If you haven't gone on our website and gotten our reading plan, I would encourage you to do that at www.crossroadscle.com. You can go to the Crossroads Online tab, go down there, and you'll see our Lenten study, and the reading plan is there. We're recording a little bit late today, but the whole goal of this Lent 40-40 challenge is to be in the Word every day. Because the reality is we need the Word of God to encourage us, to guide us, to strengthen us, to give us wisdom every single day. And so, maybe sometimes you start off a little bit late, or maybe you even do miss a day. But don't let that be the habit. We're hoping that your habit becomes being in the Word each and every day, not just only here while we're in Lenten season. So today we're looking at Job chapter 1. We're going to go off script just a hair, and we're going to read Job chapter 2 as well. So let's go ahead and start by reading Job chapter 1. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and he shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their sisters and eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified. Early in the morning he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children had sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular custom. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "But Job fears God for nothing," Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and his herds are spread throughout the land. But if you stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job, and he said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and carried them off. They put all of your servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The fire of God fell from the sky, and he burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties, and they swept down on your camels and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, yet one last messenger came and said, "Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." At this, Job got up, and he tore his robe. He shaved his head, and he fell on the ground, and he worshipped, and he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." And in all this, Job did not sin, charging God with wrongdoing. On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before God. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason." "Skin for skin," Satan replied. "A man will give all he has for his own life. But if you would just stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, he would surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores, from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and he scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. His wife even said to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." And he replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all of this, Job did not sin in what he said. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Tetramite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zohar the Naamanite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes, and they met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began weeping aloud, and they tore their robes, and they sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. So that's Job chapter 1, the first set of disasters, and Job chapter 2 was the second set of disasters, or really where Satan was allowed to inflict Job with sores all over his body. You know, a lot of times we can talk about this story and we can look at Job and the way in all of this, Job says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave and the Lord take away," and how he had such great integrity, even though everything he had been taken away. And then the second section here where he says, "Shall we accept good from the Lord and not trouble?" And never sinned in anything he said up to this point. And we can focus on that and the strength that Job had. But also we can see, and this is where I want to go today, we can see that Job was suffering greatly. He'd lost all of his wealth. He lost many of his family members, his children. He'd been stricken with sores all over his body. He was in physical pain, emotional pain, and he was just sitting distraught in ashes and in pain. And with this, his friends saw him and they realized that he was suffering. And they decided that they were going to join him. And, you know, I think that's the thing I want to focus on. The fact that the friends saw Job suffering, and rather than avoiding him, which I think sometimes we do when people are really suffering, sometimes we just stay back. Rather than that, they decided to go to him, and what they did wasn't tell him all the things that he was doing wrong or all the ways that he ought to fix his situation. What they did was they sat in sackcloth and ashes with him for 7 days, and no one said a word because they saw how great his suffering was. I think that's incredible. What a model of a godly friend that is right there. Like, the pain and suffering wasn't theirs to bear, and yet they were in his presence, in Job's presence, and they were bearing it with him. The difficulty that Job was struggling with, that wasn't their difficulty, and yet they took time, 7 straight days, to go and sit with Job. I think that's incredible. When Paul in the book of Romans is talking to the church and he's telling the church what it looks like to be the church, he's talking about love there. And he's talking about being humble servants to one another, what it looks like to be loving in action. And he says in Romans 12:15, "Rejoice with those who rejoice." Like, see the people who are rejoicing because God has blessed them, and rather than be jealous, rather than covet what they've got, rejoice with them. Be happy with them and for them because God has blessed them. Instead of looking at your own life and saying, "Well, I don't have what they have. How could I be happy for them?" Well, a great thing has happened to them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. But then in Romans 12:16, and then he goes on in Romans 15, and he says to mourn with those who mourn. And that's what we see Job's friends doing here. Again, this wasn't their problem. This wasn't their difficulty to have, to own, to carry. And yet they were mourning with Job just as he was mourning. Rather than stay away, rather than saying to themselves, well, we're just too busy, they took time out of their busy schedule to go and sit with their friend who was struggling. And, I think that's the perfect model of who Jesus is for us. Because even when we're not good friends to other people, even when we're suffering, even maybe when we're not worthy to have good friends, Jesus comes to us. Even when we're not worthy to be with, Jesus is with us. And so when Job's friends come to Job, even though he wasn't good company, even though that was kind of difficult to be around somebody who's suffering like that, Job's friends saw it. They were weeping. They felt so badly for him. They took time out of their schedule and they wept with Job for 7 days. No one said a word because they could see how badly he was suffering. And so it's important for you and for me to look around the room today. Look around our friend group. Look around our churches. Look around our neighborhoods. Are there people around us that are suffering? Maybe God is calling you today to be like Job's friends, to just sit with somebody who's struggling and to mourn with somebody who's mourning today. So look around your group, see if God is calling you to sit with somebody today and be an example like Job's friends, to be Christ to someone in need today. Amen.